Today is November 18th, a normal thank God it's Friday day for most people, but today is sentencing day for Elizabeth Holmes, who was convicted on 3 felony counts of wire fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud in the highly publicized case against her company, Theranos. Many of you voted on my poll on my community tab, which asked you how many years do you think Elizabeth will get. Well, we have the answers today, and we will see how many of you were right about her sentencing. Although Elizabeth Holmes has been sentenced, I want to highlight a speculation the day before the trial that I found interesting. According to Fox Business, quote, Larry Levine, a former federal inmate who now runs Wall Street Prison Consultants, says Holmes would be lucky to get 15 years and not more, considering the dollar amount involved alone. He said there are a number of enhancements Holmes could receive under federal sentencing guidelines too, given that her crimes were sophisticated, involving multiple conspirators and multiple victims. Fox Business asked Levine about the prospect of Holmes receiving a lenient sentence. You've got a better chance of Jesus coming back in front of you right now and being knighted by the king than her getting 18 months, Levine suggested, end quote.
Time for the Hot Topic buzz. The smoking guns that convicted Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes. One juror saying there were 2 pieces of damning evidence that sealed her fate. First, a doctor report from Theranos to investors, which was made to look like an endorsement from Pfizer, and a document of revenue projections from drug companies that Theranos did not have contracts with at the time. John, what do you make of this? I think she spent 7 days on the stand trying to do a little woe is me Svengali defense, blaming the chief operating officer and her then boyfriend, Sunny Balwani. That also didn't really work with the jurors.
Right. This, by the way, this is a Wall Street Journal story, so I'm going to plug my newspaper that you're referencing. And it's a really good story, and I would recommend it to viewers for reasons that go beyond the Elizabeth Holmes case. You know, there's so much talk about American society being fractured and, you know, our institutions falling apart, the future of democracy. I just love this story because this jury was so serious and did such a good job in deliberating this case, and it breaks it out, and it shows kind of the American sense of civic duty at work. They didn't buy Elizabeth Holmes' personal story. They also didn't buy the prosecutors claiming that patients who used some of the Theranos diagnostics were harmed. What they said was they basically got to where the real lies were and who the real victims were. And in this case, you know, the real lies came from the company, and it affected investors in the company. And the jury was so careful in how they assessed the different people they heard. I just think it's a great lesson in civic duty, that story that you're referencing.
This
today.
fraud would never been exposed without John Carreyrou, the Wall Street Journal reporter who broke it. And he stood up to, like, he was being, like, his sources were being harassed and followed by people, private investigators and lawyers hired by Elizabeth Holmes. It was David Boies who was representing her at the time, and the threats and the intimidation tactics were really astonishing. Also, he has a podcast that I highly recommend listening to, but everybody should read Bad Blood.
It's good journalism, and it's also good civic duty from the sense of the jury. It's just like, it's the kind of thing I think we need to be focusing on in this country. Not all journalists are bad. And when people have an opportunity to step up and do their duty, they do, and they did in this case.
I'm never happy to see anyone go to jail, but at the same time, I am always happy to see some type of justice prevail. In a perfect world, we would all get along and not commit crimes. But until that day comes, we have to ensure that people are held accountable for their wrongdoings. White collar, blue collar, no collar, it doesn't matter. When a crime is committed, it carries with it a penalty that we all have to abide by if convicted. It should be a small thing to ask to live our lives without violating the laws of the land, but if we do, we are subject to the terms of the law and the consequences. Bloopers. Many of you vetoed on my poll. Vetoed? Voted? Hello? Many of you voted on my poll on my community tab, which asked you how many years do you think Charley will get. Charley, I'm not going to jail.